Well, it's the evening of the Feast of the Dead, the Dia de los Muertos. And there's a couple traditional foods I have here to show you. Um, some are from, I guess, pre-Columbian times, and some are much more modern. But they've all taken their places for the Feast of the Dead, which is tomorrow, November 1st. So everyone here is preparing for that day. And first of all, here, to the lower right hand is peeb pollo. And that would be very, very traditional. I actually got that from a woman who bakes it in a fire pit. And if you look under my short videos, I think it's the only one there right now, you can see a friend of mine digging a fire pit. And that's what most indigenous Americans used. I'm sure there are exceptions of people who didn't, but most of us did use those fire pits to cook. And they cook large quantities of food too, right? So I don't know how many she baked. Oh, I'd be guessing if I told you. So this is a peeb. This one is chicken though, and you know chicken isn't from the Americas. That was brought here very early on. In fact, a story about that with turkeys. When the people who were called pilgrims came, and you know they never gave that name to themselves. They called themselves separatists from the Church of England. Excuse me. They knew so little about the Americas when they were leaving England that they bought turkeys at great price from Spain, had them sent over, and brought turkeys with them on the Mayflower, taking up very precious space. They brought no cows. They didn't have room. So chickens were something that found their way into our culture and society, but turkey would be much more traditional. And there are lots of wild turkey around here. Every morning they go by. But this happens to be chicken. It's also wrapped in banana leaves. And bananas also aren't native to the Americas. They were brought here like so many other things. And so many things from here that went around the world. So this is wrapped in banana leaves, but it's still our traditional corn. And I'll show you what that looks like. It came out of the fire, so you see it's all charred. And inside, take it off. This is what it looks like. So there. It's really just like a very big tamale. And here are some tamales. I've unwrapped one and kept the other wrapped there. Those are also chicken tamales. And they're again wrapped in banana leaves. Very traditional tamales are baked in cornmeal, but corn husks rather. But these are considered traditional also. And now you'll see the bread with the corn husks obliterating the view. There we go. Again, we had no white flour here, right? That came over. The only flour we had was corn. Well, there were amaranth and things. Not right around here, though. But corn flour was the main staple. So this is something, I cut it so that you can see inside. It has some meat and cheese in there. So it's a sweet and savory together. There's a little design on the top. And in the back left, you'll see the Pan de Muertos for the Dia de Muertos. And that's very traditional too. It's a nice big bread. It's supposed to represent a skull and bones. There's a little one. There. There. And regarding the cornbread and things like that, tortillas, all native people who had corn or maize made these same things. I remember once making a traditional mi'kmaq meal up in Toronto, and I had invited some Mexican friends to come and eat. And I remember them saying with surprise, "Oh, you learned how to cook Mexican food." So I had a good laugh and said, "No, it's all the same. Wherever there was corn, people made the same sorts of things. We all made things, we call them different, like tortillas, or uskanagan is the name we say in Mi'kmaq for our cornbread, and so on." So Mary Rowlandson wrote a book called A Narrative of My Captivity. She was captured during the King Philip's War in New England in 1675, winter of 1675-76, and wrote about, that's the first written account we have, I think, of what we call a tamale. So that would have been in western Massachusetts, near present-day Lancaster, Massachusetts. I grew up not far from there. And she had never seen this before, but she describes the process of them taking the corn and boiling it and wrapping it in the corn husks, having the corn husks used to wrap it, and then putting it into the fire. And she said it was very sweet meat indeed. So I think that's our first description in New England anyway, the northeast coast of a tamale. But all Native people, again, if you had corn, everyone didn't. You obviously had to have lived below the frost line. But people traded for corn too. There were old accounts and records of Inuit people coming down and trading for corn. I had a friend who, she was Cree. She went to law school and I was taking my master's at University of Toronto. And she had records of her, that her grandfather wrote. He worked for the Hudson's Bay Company, kept a store, was a clerk for them. And there were accounts there, she was telling me and showing me actually, of him, the transactions that they did with Inuit people who had come down for corn. But this wasn't something new, because he was writing according to their old ancient custom, and they talked about, they actually had like a pigeon between them. And you know, the definition of a pigeon is, it's not a real language. You can't write poetry in it or discuss philosophy or things like that, but it's a trade language, so you can get by. But to have that, you've got to have had some sustained contact for a while for both partners to know what's going on, both parties, right? So I remember I have had so many conversations with people. Some of them got quite heated, not on my part, but on their part, and I wondered why they're getting so upset about the origins of corn. I remember there was a student who told me, he was a fellow student, not my student, who was telling me that corn comes from Africa. And he knows this because there are words for it in his African language. And I thought, well, you know, you don't want to be dismissive because you don't want to turn people off. That doesn't get you anywhere. And your mind just rushes to so many places, such as, why isn't this taught in schools, first of all? Like, I couldn't imagine living in any other country on earth and having lived there for a while, or in many cases generations, and knowing absolutely nothing, or next to nothing, about the indigenous inhabitants. Can you imagine going to France and not knowing a word of the French language, or Italy, or fill in the blank, doesn't matter. But that's what happens here. People come here from all over the world. They don't have an interest in the land they're living in. They don't take an interest in our language, our history, our culture, how it affects them. And I think they're really missing a lot. There was a great book, and I love the book, I really did, called The Cooking Gene. And that author too, I wouldn't be recommending it if I didn't like it. But he also falls into that thing about mentioning some foods that are only from the Americas that he claims originate in Africa. One of them was, well, there are quite a few, you can read it if you want. It's worth reading, just be, like anything, you have to think through it, right, and sift out the chaff from the wheat, the chaff from the corn, I suppose. Remember that corn was a term for any grain. I've had MAGA people tell me that I know that corn comes from the Holy Land, their words, not mine, because it says that Christ plucked corn on the Sabbath. I think, oh, my poor dear child, corn was a word for any grain for a long, long time. Thomas Hardy uses that in one of his novels, that he, I forget which one off the top of my head. There was a corn merchant, and many other people did. So that was an established word for any grain well into the end of the Victorian era, even beyond a little bit. So Wayachimin would be our term for something like this, the bigger one that's cooked. And I'd like to invite you to, if you ever have a chance, to try it. And to even try to make it. It's not that complicated, it really isn't. In these things, the difference between a luscanagun is, that's the Mi'kmaq word, that's baked. And the Wayachimin would be something that's more cooked in the fire, roasted in the fire, such as this one, hence the black leaves. So that's a little introduction to some of the traditional foods on the right, and some that have become traditional on the left for the Feast of the Dead, starting at midnight tonight. Everyone's preparing for it. So much is closed. Businesses are closed. I think it's a day off for most people.